June the 6th, we tuned in for the Summer Games Fest, the yearly show where developers get to show us what we can expect to play from them in the future. Now, many great games were shown, but one game in particular stood out amongst the rest, and it took us completely by surprise. Destiny 3. LOL? Actually, it's a game called The Cube. That's it. And as someone who has played a game for years that is centered around extraterrestrial objects floating above us, being worshipped as a god, even that game is still called Destiny. It's not like our game is called Sphere. You know what I'm saying? But guys, I can't help but be entertained by the simple name The Cube. This game is being described as an MMORPG first-person shooter. That sound familiar? For the first time ever, we are seeing a game that is actually going to try to go head-to-head with Destiny. Now, some would say, but Cross, it's not a looter shooter. No, it's an MMORPG shooter, which I would even argue has more depth than just a looter shooter. And if you remember years ago, Bungie themselves were really trying to attach the MMO to their own name. But MMORPG, that's different. Name one MMORPG that doesn't require hundreds, if not thousands of hours of investment. And then on the flip side, making it a first-person shooter. Every game that has stepped in this space, whether it's been The Division, Outriders, Anthem, for one reason or another, they steer away from being a first-person shooter, but not The Cube here. And since it's revealed, guys, I have not been able to stop thinking about it. Now, before we get ahead of ourselves, I do want to take a look, though, at some of the details. You see, right now, I feel like we're getting a bit too hyped, and I think we need to look directly at the studio itself, that being Mundfish Studios. This studio of around 200 people is stationed out of Cyprus, but they have developers working all around the world. Founded in 2017, the studio is very new and has only developed and published just one game in its short lifespan, that being Atomic Heart, which was released in February of 2023. The heavily Bioshock-inspired story-driven RPG released to average to above average scores across the board, with many users and critics pointing to the cheesy, over-the-top dialogues as a main pain point. However, the game was lauded for its immersive world building and smooth-feeling gameplay, with both of those aspects doing most of the heavy lifting for review scores overall, sitting at 82%, which is very positive over on Steam. Alongside The Cube, Mundfish also announced at the Summer Game Fest two other projects they have in the works, Atomic Heart 2 and Ill, which looks to be more of a first-person horror title with enemies that look genuinely terrifying. Even with all the developmental hiccups as well as delays, Atomic Heart was still released and turned out to be a very solid game. However, around its release, some people started to do some digging and they found things that painted the studio in a not so positive light. Mundfish has come under fire in the past for having close ties to Russia, with many calling them out for not directly condemning the Russian invasion of Ukraine in a series of tweets. Now, this is just going to be a brief overview, but if you'd like to know more so that you can form your own opinion, there are plenty of videos that go in depth on just this topic, and I highly advise you check those out. However, when talking about the studio, I do think it's important to cover this topic. As always, we'll have timestamps down below if you just want to skip past this stuff. Now, this all started when people started noticing that many of the higher-ups in the company have close ties to the Russian government, as well as the studio at the time being located in Moscow before its eventual move to Cyprus around 2023. Now, this prompted them to release the aforementioned tweets, essentially saying they don't comment on political issues, and that the studio is, quote, pro-peace organization against violence against people. Now, this didn't satisfy many people, including this one user who goes by Herenko on YouTube, who made a video pleading for people to not buy the game. Now, I'll link all this down below if you want to look into it for yourself, guys, but TLDR, their main argument was that purchasing Atomic Heart could be helping to fund the Russian government. They also pointed to an old terms of service found on Mundfish's website that essentially stated that your private information could be transferred over to the Russian government. Now, Mundfish did respond to this at the time and explained that this was an old terms of service from when the company was still based in Russia and that it had already been updated. However, this fact was seemingly omitted from this video.
And will be transferred to the Russian government, in particularly the Federal Security Service, and not just your username, but your full name, physical address, email, phone number, IP address, and so on. Gotta say, their mobilization methods are getting...
I want to see if he says what he needs to say with regards to this. He might not mention it.
kind of dire. Finally, let's talk about...
Nope, sure didn't. They came out and said, yeah, no, that terms of service is extremely outdated. We haven't updated that in years and years and years. Still the terms of service from when we were based in Moscow when we first formed. And then they updated it and now it doesn't have that stuff. Of course, he doesn't mention that. He just leaves it there like, secretly they're sending all of your user data to the Russian government.
And there was also many who pointed to the game's setting being in an alternate reality. Some were also quick to point out that the game's seemingly glorified version of the USSR showcased these fantastical floating cities in a seemingly perfect utopia. utopia. However, for those who have played the game, this perfect world is merely a facade as you experience throughout the story. So yeah, that's the brunt of the controversy. Again, we wanted to discuss this because when Mundfish was brought up, we had a lot of people in our own chat saying various things that they've heard, which is why we threw together this overview. Now, with all that out of the way though, I want us to finally dive into more about the cube, starting with the atomic universe. You see, the atomic universe is the greater setting for both Atomic Heart 1 and Atomic Heart 2, with the cube right smack in the middle. During a recent interview with Game Rant, Mundfish CEO Rob Bagartuni expanded a bit more on what we can expect. He explained chronologically that the cube takes place several years after the conclusion of the Atomic Heart story. Now, as we saw in the trailer, this giant cube randomly shows up, confusing scientists all around the world. The cube itself is a huge mystery, and it seems like we'll be venturing to its surface in an attempt to help solve that mystery. Now, he went on to say that the cube is a very important part of the atomic universe and the storytelling. You do not have to play Atomic Heart to understand the cube, but it is in the same universe. You can enter the universe of Atomic Heart through different angles. You can enter it through the cube. So just know that while I'm sure playing Atomic Heart could possibly enrich the storytelling and lore, it isn't something that is necessary. Now, what we know about Atomic Universe though, through Atomic Heart, is that, like we mentioned earlier, it's an alternate reality where the Soviet Union developed a new programmable substance called polymer. This led to rapid technological breakthroughs in both robotics as well as energy, and ultimately making many everyday jobs entirely replaced by these robots, leaving many people free of manual labor. Atomic Heart takes place in 1955, and we know that the cube will take place several years after, but we don't have an exact time frame as of yet. Now, as we said in the intro, this game came completely out of left field. At first, the trailer seemed interesting, and we thought maybe this was another extraction shooter. Like, no lie, within the first few frames, I was already like, dude, here it is, another extraction. But then they described it as a first-person MMORPG, and that's when the hype levels were off the charts.
An MMORPG shooter set in the Atomic Universe on a massive levitating cube. You can see there where the edges are constantly rotating to create Invasion Universe. The new retro
You're taking me
multiplayer
now!
fun.
I need you guys to understand something. This specific genre of game doesn't exist outside of Destiny. But wait, Cross, what about Warframe or The Division? Yes, those are similar, but the third person. Destiny is the only one that is actually a first-person shooter trying to take a stab in the direction of being an MMO. Now, most people would say that Destiny is like MMO light. Its veins are definitely more looter shooter, as being an MMORPG normally has a ton of depth. Whatever the case though, there are a total of 0 games that really fall underneath this same umbrella. And there's a reason why we continue to play Destiny for so many years. For all the negatives about it, and trust me, there are plenty of negatives. You literally can't get a first-person experience like it anywhere else. No other game has day 1 raids, dungeons, a splash of PvP, and if anything, what we imagine a Destiny 3 would have been that game that leaned more into those MMORPG roots, that continued to expand upon the MMO aspects that really began in Destiny 1, which is why I'm really curious about the cube. You see, the cube presents competition. It's something that's extremely important when it comes to games. Competition only furthers innovation, and us as gamers should want more of our favorite games to innovate and feel that competition. Because we've seen in the past that when developers need to give it their all, that's when we get expansions like the Final Shape. And I think we can all agree that Destiny needs more of that. Now, we also know that the cube has also confirmed a live service. In an interview with PC Games, Ragatuni talked about working on DLCs for Atomic Heart, helped establish a good production pipeline. Quote, "We really know how to produce good quality, interesting content to enrich the game. The cube will have a lot of content, it's live ops, and now we as a team really know how to deliver that and organize our internal processes." He was also asked a more direct question regarding the risk of developing a live service game. You guys have even seen those risks play out over the past few years, most notably Sony with Concord. Now, in response to this, he said, "What we want to ensure is that we create a game that is fun to play, that people actually need it and want it. Not that we come up with some crazy idea that no one needs." He also went on to say that they've been playtesting heavily with over 70 playtests in the last 2 years. Now, another reason we've remained interested in learning more about this game was that Destiny was mentioned on multiple occasions as being a source of inspiration for the cube, with that same Game Rant article from earlier describing it as having its roots in MMO shooters like Destiny and Warframe. The official trailer on the Mundfish YouTube channel even has Destiny 2 as one of its tags. So they're clearly going for more of a looter shooter audience, which is awesome to see. The last time a game looked to be be aiming for this type of audience was actually Arc Raiders. A lot of people forget that when it was initially revealed, it was said to be a looter shooter until they pivoted to an extraction shooter. In their case, though, I actually feel like it turned out to be a great decision, as most people are pretty hyped about it. But as someone who's been playing these type of games for years, as someone who's seen the rise and fall of games like Anthem and Outriders, for whatever reason, I guess I have a preferred game genre. Destiny and Warframe and games like that seems to be the kind of game that I gravitate back towards. But it's no doubt we haven't really had a game try to insert itself in this specific genre for quite some time, outside of maybe like the first Descendants. But I'd argue and say that game's got an entirely different demographic. Hey brother, I ain't hating. Now in terms of the gameplay loop for the Cube, we don't have a ton of information on this. We do have some things to go off of from both the Steam page as well as Mundfish's website. The Cube is described as having, quote, constantly rotating rows and edges that create unexpected scenarios and combinations of the environment, as well as new combat challenges. Now, this is something we see a couple of times in the trailer, with the world seemingly changing around the player. We also can see just how diverse the environments seem to be, with biomes clashing into other biomes. One shot looks almost like a swamp area where players encounter this fishman creature, but then another shows off a colder looking climate with snow everywhere, and even this giant snowman type enemy. We even see a player go through some sort of portal that teleports them to a completely new looking area. And in this shot, we also get our only look at the HUD for the game. Overall, pretty standard, and this of course is a reveal trailer, so take all of this with pounds of salt. Things always change. But it looks like next to our health in the bottom left, it appears we have some consumables. Then to the right next to our weapon, we see two other icons, which can maybe be abilities as well as an icon in the very middle. And it seems like some abilities are sprinkled throughout. Like here where a player lifts an enemy into the air, or where it looks like someone activates maybe some extra armor for the team before they fight. Then we also see this really cool sequence of players running through a broken city. When asked about the challenges surrounding having an online experience with something as massive as this and it constantly changing, Bragatuni went on to explain the challenges that the team face when trying to make this idea become reality. Quote, it's probably the first time in the industry that something like this is possible. It's definitely a technological breakthrough because before it was impossible to use the engine to ensure that so many objects could be simultaneously rotating and still provide a stable online experience. Even going on to compare it to the original Crysis when it launched and how it really pushed the industry forward in terms of the graphics and what technology goes along with it. He also spoke about how as the cube rotates, it reveals different biomes that then start to interconnect, which can greatly affect gameplay and your decision making. He also said that the constant changing of your surroundings will force you to change your playstyle and to look at the whole game from a different angle, perhaps multi-dimensional. Now, we don't know much currently about the technology surrounding the cube, but we do have a small bit to go off of from the Mundfish website. It says an innovative split rendering system that transforms how motion is handled in interactive environments. This proprietary technology powers the dynamic world of the cube, enabling seamless transitions, intelligent object tracking, and multiplayer synchronization. Now, I'm gonna be honest, guys. Look, I'm hyped, but at the same time, brother, how's this really gonna work, right? Like, I need to see some raw gameplay. What's the servers gonna look like for this thing? Because Bragatuni is right. This is crazy. The amount of objects moving at once, all happening online for multiple players. It's not like it's a static dome in a BR game that's constantly closing in on you. This entire world is shifting. What I will say is if they actually do pull this off, that alone will set the cube apart from really anything else. Now, it's also shown that we're gonna have customizable characters with progression tied to a skill tree. Now, it was alluded to there possibly being classes, but Bragatuni didn't comment any further, saying it was still too early to say for sure. He also made it clear that exploration was going to play a big role in how players experience the world. Quote, there are always unanswered questions. Some mysteries are there. We see the player as this explorer who doesn't ever clock out, who always has this world to come back to. No lie, that's exactly what we want to hear as gamers, right? Tell me to abandon my life, abandon thy family. I'll do it. Just make me a game worth it. Now, from the website, we also got a small blurb regarding progression, where it states that deep and persistent progression, constant character development and customization that reward individual playstyles. Even failure won't halt player progression. You see, this part interested me. Like I said at first, we kind of thought this was an extraction shooter. The wording there almost sounds like an extraction shooter, at least an extraction shooter trying to actually convince you that dying isn't the end of everything. Although in the moment, it definitely feels that way. My thought process, though, when you say that, hey, we're making a first-person shooter, but it's an MMORPG, fellas, I expect incredible depth. I don't know a single MMORPG that's just like, hey, yeah, this is a 100-hour game. You're gonna get in, get out, have fun. No. Dude, every MMORPG I've ever played is like, get ready, abandon thy life. You're gonna find a clan, you're gonna take a new wife, start a new family. Look, I'm being dramatic right now, but the point is, MMORPGs normally bring an immense amount of progression that requires a ton of time commitment, and therefore what's necessary is depth. Now, another interesting thing we noticed on Steam page is that it's possibly hinting at PvP. There was a section at the bottom that says some groups are demonstrating deviation from protocol. Then we see that this text right here is scratched out, and it looks like it says attacking allies and killing seekers. Now, seekers, by the way, seem to be the name given to us, the player. Now, this could just be referring to hostile human NPCs. However, with the Division being a source of inspiration, there could in fact be a dark zone on the cube. So let me just say I very much enjoyed inside of the Division. Go out in the world, accumulate a bunch of dope loot, take that loot, put it up for risk right there against other players in the dark zone. Again, though, this is just speculation, and we'll have to wait for some official wording from Mundfish. Now, from the perspective of a Destiny player, there are going to be some things I'm going to be looking out for. For example, will we see any type of dungeon-like activities? Does Mundfish want to take a stab at raids? That is one thing that Destiny really does better than any other game, at least when it comes to shooters. The dungeon and raid experiences are arguably second to none, and something you really can't get anywhere else. Mundfish will show me they are way more than serious about this if they come out and say, yes, we will be offering dungeon or raid-like experiences. And considering they mentioned Destiny 2 being part of the inspiration for the cube, then they have to know that we as Destiny players truly value the dungeon raid experience. Now, we know there will be powerful boss-type enemies. That's already been disclosed to us, but I'm more interested to see what that means exactly. Will there be mechanics around them? How will we go about finding these bosses? Now, I guess you can also draw conclusions from Atomic Heart. Atomic Heart, there was a lot of puzzles, and you would have to solve those puzzles in what were essentially dungeons. Question is that something we can expect to see inside of the cube? That would be great if that was the case, but we just don't have that information at the moment. Now, something else that's pretty vital is how will loot work? Will it be more closely to how loot works inside of Destiny, where you directly loot weapon drops, or more closely to Warframe, where you build weapons with components that you find? And then the broader question of the gameplay loop, what exactly is it? We know from the websites that we're going to have some sort of quest system, but that's all we have to go off of currently. I am very interested to see how these things will play out, because if this really is the genre that these guys are targeting, brother, I can make videos for days talking about my wish list, my forever kind of game. This may be the game, if it actually lands, that I ride off into the sunset. I'm the type that marries my games, and I'm always looking for that forever game. That game that I can play for the next 100 years, man, and die a happy man. Now, before wrapping up this video, I do want to point out that we could potentially be a very good way off from the release of this game. At this time, we aren't very sure about the release date or even how far along the development is of the cube. What I will say though, guys, we will be putting out our fillers. We're affiliated with Loaded now, and they actually do a very good job of knowing which games are coming down the pipe. So as soon as we know something about the cube, I will let you guys know as quickly as I can. With that being said, let me know in the comments below what you think. Is this a game that you're excited for? Is this another Anthem 2.0? God, I hope not, right? Please. Let me just say this. I could do an entire video right now talking about Anthem and how it could have been it, man. But we'll keep that topic for another video. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching. And as always,
Slap that like button like your mama told you right.